envisioning what this event might become, we did start with our goals, objectives, our values, where we wanted to put emphasis as we invited people to join us. And one of the first names that came up to be invited as a keynote speaker was Lisa Fenton. And it's not because she has cut her teeth as an instructor of outdoor skills and bushcraft, which she has done. But she is pushed onwards to ask difficult questions, to go beyond just the skills and the sharing, but to ask the whys and the histories, and to challenge us in new ways. So I am extremely excited to welcome Lisa. You were one of our first choices once we left North America anyway, and we are extremely excited that you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a huge honour and obviously quite intimidating to be here when there's people like Dave Westcott and Dave Holliday, people who have taught me in the past. So, the title of my talk's a bit odd. It emerged out of Dave Westcott and Dale's YouTube conversation, and in it, Dave Westcott was expressing the difficulty of trying to define and separate and look at where different sort of cognate-related disciplines come together and where they separate. And he called it bumping heads. So I thought I would start by picking up on some of that. And I called the talk bumping heads. And it got turned into bashing heads, which is a lot more violent than mine ever. So I'm from the UK. I first started learning these skills with a man called Ray Mears, who many of you will have heard of. I was very lucky in the late 90s and was offered an apprenticeship and apprenticed him in the UK, teaching and learning, mostly, bushcraft skills for about 4 years. I then went on to set up my own business. I co-ran that, called Woodsmoke, and I did that for about 18 years. So I've been out in the field, mostly out in the woods, teaching bushcraft, woodcraft, survival, whatever we want to call it, for about 18 years. During that time, I got to a point where I felt like I wanted to bring an academic slant on this. So I went and did a master's degree in ethnobotany at the University of Kent in Kew Gardens. And I had no intention to go on to do a PhD, but they taught me into doing a PhD. So much so that they said, you can choose whatever topic you'd like. And this was in anthropology now. And I said, well, the only thing that's going to interest me for 3 years is bushcraft, thinking there's no way anyone's going to fund me to do research into bushcraft. But actually, my supervisor was very enthusiastic about it. And I kind of thought, oh no, because I thought that would get me out of to do a PhD. No one's going to fund this. And I thought, and I didn't think long and hard, because I really didn't want to do it. But I thought, actually, when will an opportunity like this come again, where an academic institution is going to fund 3 years of research into bushcraft and its relationship with Indigenous knowledge was the title, Transformations of a Concept in the Modern World. And by God, does this concept transform? A lot of today's talk, I will talk about some research, but I'm going to start with some history. And I say some history because it was driving me crazy trying to put together a talk that didn't end up the whole time talking about history, because there's so much of it. And there's so many different historical threads that come together to form this concept, this modern idea we call bushcraft, and bushcraft is a modern concept. It only originates really from the Enlightenment onwards. Before that, it was just living. So, I should also mention that the University of Cumbria, where I'm now a lecturer in outdoor studies, have been there for 3 years. They funded for me to come over here as well. I have just had validated a bushcraft pathway of their master's degree, so that's a first. That's a new one for bushcraft as well, as it's seeping into academia. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that, but I need a flicker. Okay. Okay, that was what I was going to talk about, my PhD. That was myself and my son came over, actually I will go back to that. So myself, I came over with my son, who's now 8, and he was 8 months old, and Bombers Boulder Outdoor Survival School, Steve Dessinger allowed us to come and do some research back at Boss. I first went to Boss in 1998 actually to learn, and I was taught by Dave Westcott. There's a slide, Dave Holiday, there's a slide that we'll see later. So I did some field research in America, I did some field research in the UK, and a little bit in Sweden as well, with Lars and Juha Rinkkinen. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the roots of survival, and this is just picking up on some threads. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, but essentially, the roots of bushcraft come from 3 core areas, which all overlap. So we have remote exploration. Basically from the 1500s, we're starting to, the Brits, certainly, and the French, are starting to explore remote areas. And for colonial reasons, we wanted resources. We just wanted to know what was out there. This often led to conflicts, certainly in areas like North America. And trade development too. As you guys will know, this is your history. And what it does is these areas, these hybrid knowledge domains where Western explorers are meeting and bumping heads, shall we say, if not flashing, the local indigenous populations, sometimes this was obviously incredibly violent, it was colonial, it was the usual processes of war and violence. But also there was knowledge that was needed to be had. And it produces these, is this my one? And it produces these kind of types in the different frontiers. So we have explorers, rangers, scouts, mountain men, frontiersmen, guerrilla soldiers, in Australia, bushmanship. And they're all, in a way, sharing similarities of new hybrid knowledge domains that were arising from the colonial advancement, if you like, into alien ecologies. We didn't know how to do it, we didn't know how to relate to these ecologies, and so we necessarily had to employ indigenous knowledge to do it. I put this slide up because I think survivalism today, you can almost see the roots of it in Robinson Crusoe. And Robinson Crusoe was based on the story of Alexander Selkirk. He was a buccaneer, he got stranded, well actually, he decided not to get back on his boat because he felt it was going to sink. It did sink actually. And he was left on an island in, oh my god, it's come out of my head. He was left on an island and he was picked up something like 4 years later, and he had survived well and adjusted to his life, and he wrote about it. And Robinson Crusoe was also written, but both of these stories in Victorian England just went mad. I mean, they absolutely loved it. It was the second bestseller, I think, at the time, Robinson Crusoe. So it's interesting that that kind of media sensationalism was around back then as well. And of course, Desert Island Survivor and Red Girls are kind of synonymous with their sensationalism as well. Okay, so in the Australian context, British explorers went, when they first went out to Australia, obviously they didn't know a thing about the ecology there. Everything was new and alien. They thought they were going into pristine wilderness because they did not see the local inhabitants as having shaped the wilderness in any way. Because the local inhabitants they saw as having no technology, they felt that the wilderness was pristine and untouched. However, they needed these guys' knowledge. The first explorations in the land only lasted a few days before they ran out of water and had to turn back. So more and more, they employed indigenous knowledge to know where to find water in the landscape and to push deeper into the landscape. And basically learning how to relate to linear ecology. And part of my research was to dive into all these old journals and find bits where they start talking about the kinds of skills they learn from different indigenous people. So, for instance, in Australia, some of these journals talk about mopping up dew with other fibres to drink, and that's a skill that we see right now in survival books today. It's people like John Eyre that wrote about it. Of course, you guys will be very familiar with your own history. I'm not a historian, and I don't understand how to give you your history. But, you know, the economics of fur and trade, the woods runners, the Coureurs de Bois, the voyageurs, these were all the development of hybrid cultures in North America. The style of dress was hybridized, the techniques, the learning how to make, I assume, birchbark canoes. But these guys didn't necessarily trap as I understood it. That came later with mountain men, where the skills of fur trading and trapping became so absorbed into this hybrid culture that actually now they weren't relying on indigenous knowledge, they were trapping furs for themselves. Warfare developed the skills of ranging, scouting, reconnaissance, stealth. Because when the Brits first turned up and the Indian Wars began, they were wearing bright red tunics. They were just targets. And they were losing really badly. So they soon learned, or maybe eventually learned, that they needed to adopt the ways of the indigenous population. And they didn't just copy them, there were indigenous peoples who taught them, who became part of the British military, just as there were who became part of the French. But these skills transferred again into a new skill set that combined both Western and indigenous knowledge. And these were the skills of reconnaissance, of long-distance travel, of stealth and tactics, which we can still kind of see in the military today. So, I'm just really skipping around a bit with this, so it feels a bit disjointed to talk about it. But, you know, I'm just trying to draw together a few threads, not all of them. So as the frontier became established, there were people such as Frederick Russell Vernon, who, I don't know if anyone's ever read Scouting on Two Continents, but he's a guy who was a leading scout down in the West, and he, when the frontier closed, got bored and decided that he was going to go to Africa to join the Boer War over there. And he learned from the indigenous peoples and also the famous guys like Kit Carson and people like that. He took all those skills, scouting skills, over to Africa. And of course, I've skipped to, you know, I should have probably got a slide with Baden-Powell in there, but when he got to Africa, he met Baden-Powell. And Baden-Powell kind of took all the knowledge he could from Frederick Russell Vernon, and that's where Baden-Powell learned to scout. And that's where the idea of scouting came. But of course, Baden-Powell, after his service in South Africa, he became quite famous for his exploits in the UK, and when he went back, he was very famous. And he developed the idea of military preparedness, should we say, for youth. You know, the youth weren't doing so good. It was wartime, they were on the streets. He wanted to kind of clean them up and make sure that if there was war, they were ready for it. And his approach was a very militaristic approach. It wasn't necessarily about developing people for their own personal growth or skills. It was about preparing them for military. Back then, you know, obviously things have moved and changed. However, he met with Seaton. I can see Julia sitting right there. And I'm sure she can tell you about all of them. But he met with Seaton to discuss their ideas. Only what he actually did was took a whole load of Seaton's work and turned it into the Boy Scouts movement. I've seen a lot of historical documents that show what Baden-Powell's original intentions was and how they changed after he met Seaton and read his birch bark roll. So Seaton was coming from a different angle. So we're getting into the youth movements now. We've gone from the deep history, the frontiers, and into kind of a recreation, education shift. So in terms of skills and context, the context has now changed. The wars are over, the frontiers have closed, but the skills themselves have transformed into something else, into recreation and into education. And you have this, well, as it says here, as the frontier began to close, the earlier woodcraft skills as required by the frontiersmen were transformed into recreational pastime and practice. And that's really Dave Westcott's area, etc. Lots of things happen. That's one of them. Where there's a whole load of literature and cultural transformation and woods culture that comes from that. Summed up by the art of getting along well in the wilderness by using nature's storehouse. So the whole thing with woodcraft was that it was very much a utilitarian approach to nature. It wasn't leave no trace, it was leave a trace. But what kind of trace are you going to leave? There's an ethic there. So whilst leave no trace was an ethic, so was woodcraft. A very, very strong one. And one that was involved and engaged and hands-on. Leave no trace had the effect of going down another route towards sort of modern camping as we know it, with tents and nylons and new petrochemical substances and materials. And what that served to do was insulate people, in my opinion. It insulated people more and more from the wilderness that they went to visit. And woodcraft and the ethics of woodcraft is the opposite. It wants to constantly open up a relationship with the natural world. One that's curious, one that's playful, one that's physical. We don't just want to sit and look at it. Of course we love looking at it. But part of the love is the engagement, the understanding of materiality within it. So I'm skipping around again, sorry. And I want to go back to the UK, because bushcraft, as we're calling it, I would say it certainly originated in the UK. It was a colonial set of skills for going into alien ecologies that we had no relationship with, and then learning how to make a relationship in those ecologies. This piece, I was looking for evidence all the time. You know, where is bushcraft mentioned in the literature? I can see people are doing what I would call bushcraft, but it's not being said as a word yet. By the middle of the 1800s, Francis Galton, who was cousin to Darwin, wrote a book called The Art of Travel. And that was the first book that kind of codified all this travelling, frontiers, what they called colonial craft, knowledge from all the different parts of the empire, and they started to collate all of that. And it was called The Art of Travel, or Ships and Contrivances, available in wild countries. I love the long titles that they have. But Billy Rioux, who works with André Beauvoir, he contacted me. He dug up some really, I thought was really crucial evidence for bushcraft as a term and what it means. And that was this bit here. He'd found Galton's biographer, and he'd found some notes in his diaries or something like that, which showed that he had penned originally for the title to be Hints for Australian Immigrants, Bushcraft, The Science of Travel, Hints on Rough Travel. These were ideas for his title for this seminal book. This is the first book that comes out like this in the mid-1800s. So that was really critical in saying, oh, God, yeah, that's right. This is where bushcraft is coming from. He also sent me this, which is a little excerpt from a newspaper. You probably can't read it, it's a bit blurred. Where it says, when was this? This was 1853. The wilds of Australia being designated in colonial parlance the bush. We use the term bushcraft as an appropriate one for that knowledge of the wilderness and its ways, which elsewhere called woodcraft. So I think that's a really nice thing, because to me, bushcraft is like woodcraft that's gone travelling further globally, outside of North America and British woodland. So that was a pretty special phone for me from Billy, so thank you, Billy. The term, I'm just going to stop there for a minute. So the term bush was first used in sort of colonial settlements, so we see it a lot in Australia. But you also see it in America. In 1826, in Virginia, there's documents referring to settlement claims that use the term bush, not bushcraft, but bush. And in Canada, obviously it's been used, but it came out of colonial settlement documents. And it was usually used to denote everything that wasn't civilized, so untilled land, basically. It didn't have to be forest, it could be forest, but it could be anything that just wasn't settled. Jumping around again. I hope you guys are going to piece this together. In the late 1800s, the frontiers had closed, the Boer War was over, the wars in India and the Indian frontier were also finishing. And these frontiersmen with these sort of special military reconnaissance skills in Canada, in North America, in Africa, in India, they were kind of had nothing to do now. So they formed this paramilitary group called the Legion of Frontiersmen. This was based in London, but it had people like Seaton, I believe, and also Baden-Powell, and other famous frontiersmen from all over the world. That formed a group in case war started again. They wanted to keep these skills alive because they recognised the specialness of these particular skills. So, as it says here, for legion purposes, a scout is a man trained in lone self-reliance and the arts of reading country, tracking, hunting, and bushcraft. So we've got it again in its context. Who has had experience in dealing with dangerous folk, whose fully developed powers of observation have been tested by intelligence work. So it's in relation there to special forces, I guess. There are extremely few such scouts, so they felt they were quite elite. I'm quite sure they were. But I think this is another interesting link where bushcraft shows where its roots are. It's very connected to military, it's very connected uncomfortably to colonialism, it's very connected to needing to be able to relate and adapt to a range of landscapes. It's travelling knowledge, it needs to move. You can also probably maybe just about see, on the inside cover of this book, there's an advert for a school in Enfield, which is where I was born, or Middlesex. The Imperial School of Colonial Instruction. I mean, they're not messing around here. And they call it colonial craft in the thing underneath. So it's beyond, it's beyond clear where this is coming from. And and I find that slightly very awkward and uncomfortable as well and interesting. So, we got up to the Legion of Frontiersmen. Robert Baden-Powell was a part of it, Seaton, I believe, was a part of it, and that was the early 1900s, at the same time as the first kind of youth movements, which we've covered a bit, were starting. During the interwar years particularly, there was an explosion of youth movements, and they all had very different ideologies, some very left, some very right, some very strange, some very based on indigenous ways of knowing, some very Indianist in their approach. But they all basically had the same skills. So the political context for the skills ranged massively, but they were all using the same skills to essentially develop and educate youth. World War II, I'm skipping around, sorry, there's so many different threads to this that it's really difficult to know how to put it over. World War II, another link to bushcraft and its relationship to indigenous knowledge, was with the survival manuals. So we'd had World War I, our technology had advanced into aircraft, a lot of aircraft were coming down. In the interwar years, the military funded a lot of research into indigenous knowledge. How do we survive if our pilots are downed in remote areas? Maybe we can learn something from people who live in remote areas. So that knowledge was gathered into, I kind of say survival manuals like that because really they were really quite in-depth ethnographers, some of these. I mean, Stephenson's Arctic Manual is, you know, a tome. It's a huge ethnography. And then slowly, those ethnographers, or proto-ethnographers, were sort of turned into, they were more and more codified, they were more and more simplified and turned into universal skills, things that could be adapted wherever you went. Once we get into the 1940s and 50s, particularly in Australia, the term bushcraft becomes much more obvious and well known. You know, there's lots of books now that are putting bushcraft on their covers. And then we skip forward a bit further, and I'm just now tracing the word really, into, of course, Moses' northern bushcraft. But also we start to get primitive survival skills, or primitive technologies. That has another history of its own, which I can't cover as well. But I believe Dave's going to be talking about Dave Holiday, or we'll be talking about this a bit more. And I would probably suggest that primitive survival skills or primitive technologies is a newer concept, ironically, because whilst it deals with Stone Age and ancient technologies, it doesn't have a military history. I don't think it has a military history. I think it comes much more just out of the desire to reconstruct old technologies and learn how they're used, what do they mean when we relate them to the land, how do we live them, and my God, this is fun, let's live it some more. Lars? Lars, of course, as well. So in Britain, the Swedish influence is huge in bushcraft, and that is down to Lars's influence on Ray Mears, who brought a lot of the things that he learned from Lars back into the UK. And you can see in Ray's work as well that it changes when he meets Lars. And the skills that he teaches slightly change, and we start to get this northern Swedish influence within the bushcraft realm. And I'm just going to bring it back to Ray, because in the UK he was hugely influential and really coined the term bushcraft. But as I think it was Les said on the first night, but no, it might have been Patrick McGunchy who said he didn't actually use that term for a long time. It was the survival handbook. Bushcraft came later when he got into the media and stuff. Okay. I hope you're still with me. So essentially, bushcraft sits in the middle of these three quite powerful knowledge domains. We've got indigenous knowledge, military survival training, and wilderness recreation. And what I was hoping to do was just do enough of the history to get us here to say, we can definitely say this. Bushcraft absolutely is related to the military. It is absolutely related to indigenous knowledge via the military and the need to adapt to new lands. And it's related to wilderness recreation through the woodcraft movement. And within wilderness recreation, I would include education as well. I have no idea how I'm doing for time, so I feel like I'm interrogating.
You're good.
You're good.
I'm good, am I?
You're good.
Thank you. So I was thinking about Dave Westcott's bumping heads scenario, and like how can we think about this complexity? I I think it's important to have some thoughts about it and not just let it loose and go, hey, well, you know, who cares, we're just going to make Bojo votes. Because in these histories are important lessons about the direction, the philosophies, and the values from which this arises out of. Military survival training is very different from bushcraft. Les Stroud talked about it. Military survival training, when you follow that direction far enough, is survival at any cost. It necessarily has to be. Military survival training is about the fear, how you overcome fear for a start, about what happens when you're cut off from your supply line, what happens when you're downed. You want to get back to communications, you want to get back to home, well not home, but the base. Bushcraft's going in the other direction completely. You know, bushcraft is saying, I want to get away from civilization. I don't like all this technology and stuff. I want to get out into nature. What do I need to know? How do I make a relationship with the natural world? What do I need to know to be there? And of course, they overlap. That's why they're not bashing heads, but they might be bumping. And you know, all families have arguments, and it's all part of a family tree, I think. So they're not the same things, but they influence each other. And this was quite roughly put together. So the intersections, kind of just their ideas about what might sit in between those. So indigenous knowledge and wilderness recreation, you might put traditional journeying skills. I'm thinking about people like Conivers, who Paul was talking about before. You might put sort of earth educations, wilderness therapy, Indianism. These sorts of ideas sit between because they're related to indigenous knowledge, but we use them recreationally. We're not living it. So this is kind of fairly short. Military is really short term in a way. I mean, it might not be, but it's looking at short term, what happens in an emergency. The other thing about military, and Les Stroud brought this up, and I certainly wrote about it in my thesis as well, was the difference between real military training, which is absolutely necessary, of course, and survival entertainment. And I think I call it pop survivalism in my thesis. Because it is, it's popular survivalism, isn't it? And if you go down that direction far enough, you're going to end up with zombie survivalism, apocalyptic scenarios, all kinds of weird gadgetry that you see like people selling. It's just bizarre, but it's fantasy, you know. Military survival training is not fantasy. Pop survival training is fantasy. And I think that's a really important distinction. And do you know what? There's maybe nothing wrong with a bit of fantasy if that's what you know it is. It's when we confuse these categories that it becomes a problem. So, you know, if you want to play a survival computer game, because it's not just TV media, you know, this sort of idea of survivalism is in computer games and Tomb Raider and YouTube, and you know, they can go way down that path. If you follow the direction of bushcraft, far enough down the kind of indigenous path, it wants to go towards indigenous knowledge. It is not indigenous knowledge, but it wants to move towards the values held with indigenous knowledge about making a relationship to landscape. We go there because we love it, we enjoy it, it uplifts us. And that's a lot what my research showed, which I hope to talk about next. Sorry about that. So this was a photo, an old photo, so it's been scanned, of when I first came out to Boss in 1998. And so yeah, you know that name, and Dave, you might remember me now. And I met David Holiday. He was my instructor on the 2-week hunter-gatherer survival course. And I was about 25 here, and was really keen. I was mad keen. There was nothing like it in the UK. I'd only just found out about Ray Mays. I'd done 1 or 2 courses with Ray. Came over here, saved up, did this course, and it absolutely blew my mind, as many people I think have experienced on Boss courses. And one of the most powerful moments, I think, to my life today was tickling trouts, learning to tickle trouts. And there was me, Dave, another instructor whose name I can't remember, and 3 other guys. And we were sat in that cave, and it's by the water, and we were hungry. It was about 4 or 5 days in, and I saw lots of fish in the water. And I was like, I need to get some of those fish out of the water. And Dave said, sure, just take yourself up the river and tickle them. And he did a quick sort of hand demo of what I needed to do, and off I went. So I did, and I went through this whole process of trying to learn how to tickle trout. And eventually, I was getting my hands around them, but they were slipping out my hands. I was getting really upset because I could get to the point where I could get my hands on them, but I could not for the life of me get them out. And I'd seen in books that you flip them out, but this was in a canyon, so I couldn't flip them anymore. And eventually, I figured out I needed to stick my thumb in this girl. I didn't know if it would work or not, but that's what I did. And when I caught this fish, I cried my eyes out. I'm not a crying sort of person, but I did. And I think the emotional impact of that direct experience of going into the wilderness with very, very little, nothing really, and sourcing food with my own hands, with no technology mediating that at all, was really powerful, and that really stuck with me right up until I write my thesis. So I think moving the context again into the modern day, and what my research into bushcraft showed in the UK and some of it in America, is related to what I've written here. Surrounded by the built landscape, it's become difficult for many people to relate to their environment. This alienation from nature has contributed to the environmental problems of the contemporary world. But at the same time, it's triggered a search for new ways of relating to nature. That makes me sound a bit far-fetched, I don't know. But certainly, as a researcher and a scientist, I'm reading papers all the time that are pointing to this. In the UK, the disconnection from nature is a huge problem. This feeling, this alienation that people don't even often know that they have. And it's turning into mental illness, and it's turning into bad behaviour in classrooms. And you get these kids outside, you get people outside, and things happen, things change in them. And I'm sure lots of you who lead groups have seen this over and over and over again. So I was thinking about the biggest context is an environmental problem. Okay, so it's the widest thing. There's all sorts of things in there, but one aspect might be that our relationship with the natural world has broken down. And certainly, I was at a Nature Connections conference in the UK not so long ago, a bunch of academics all talking about nature connection. Nature connection scales, nature connection this, nature connection that. They don't talk about how people connect to nature. It's just this concept that academia is starting to throw out there. To me, bushcraft, woodcraft, primitive technologies, they are all skills, survival skills, they're all skills that connect us back to the landscape. So, this term affordances, it's an academic term used by an ecological psychologist, James Gibson, to describe how we relate to objects in our environment. So he will say, it isn't just when we look at the environment, we're not just looking at planes and lights and shadow, we're looking at potential, we're looking at possibilities. So for a little child, these stairs might afford climbing up. For me, they might afford falling down if I had enough to drink. But it affords different things for different people. And that was a really useful concept actually, because it's relational. It's not just saying that tree is a tree, and I view it as a tree. It's saying, what does that tree mean to me? What's my relationship to that tree? What could I use it for? And I thought this was really integral to how we understand land skills. So bushcraft is about learning to see. It's about learning to see, actually, but it's about learning to see into landscape, to access its affordances. But what our environment affords us depends on our skill level. So, a river that affords canoeing down for poor Kirtley won't afford canoeing down for me. It'll afford drowning, probably. But do you see what I mean? It's this idea of performances in landscape is directly related to skill and our abilities, our personal abilities and our personal knowledge. Where skilled individuals can see possibilities in the landscape and its materials, to the unskilled we might see only bleakness and hostility. And I like this slide because to the unskilled, you don't want to walk into a freezing landscape, you'll die. You know, we must all hear that all the time. Why would you do that? That's crazy, there's nothing there. But in the foreground, you know, we see the skill. We see someone who has an axe that they know how to use. They've carved a kuksa, which is demonstrating that they have skill with a knife, with crafts. They know how to transform their environment for their benefit. They know how to make a home in that environment. You know, the kuksa dangling there represents a cup that's a cup that you sit around a campfire with. And so, yeah, it's turning that bleakness into home through skill, through being able to see possibility. So this is not only a matter of external skill, though. This is not only a matter of I can produce kuksa, but it's also the development of inner qualities. When I started my research, I did some case studies. So 3 of the case studies in my research were friction fire, because it's iconic, trapping, figure 4 trapping, and also green woodworking and carving. Because these are all things that are really iconic in UK bushcraft. But obviously friction fire is the biggest icon. And so I asked people how they felt when they made friction fire. I did a big survey, hundreds and hundreds of people filled it in, and I asked them how they felt that moment they blew flame to fire. And I got lots back, you know, they didn't just say good. Everyone was in loads and it was brilliant. And they were saying it felt magical, it felt alchemical, it felt transformational. I also, of course, got the frustration, joy after frustration, relief, and all of this. So, I was going to something else. But yeah, so they felt joy, but they felt, that was it. So the thing that came out over and over again is they felt connected to their ancestors, or they felt connected to who they are as a human animal. Because when you think about it, us as humans, when we take 2 sticks and rub them together, we're making an element. And that element transforms that environment for us. Obviously it makes it livable. So it would make sense in a way. But I spent my whole life having people say to me, I'm sure lots of you have, you know, do you need a light? Do you want some matches? Every time you try and do a virtual demonstration. And you know, you do, you sit there and think, yeah, why am I doing that? And often research questions are personal questions, and I realised that as I went through this was actually a personal question. Why am I bothering with this? We don't need this. What is it useful for? And actually, people like Beard and Seaton also questioned this. So why am I doing it? And actually, what people were saying about reconnecting to an ancient self or a primal self, these were all words, not my words, the words that came out, I realised it was about eschewing modern technology. It was about self-reliance, it was direct, it was about they could go into the landscape and they had all the knowledge they needed to make the most essential thing for human survival, without even a match, potentially. So it was a counter to all that industrialisation, technology, etc. I thought, okay, now what do I do with that? Because this is academia, I can't just say it, I need some theory behind it. And the theory that I found that rang most true was Karl Marx. So I'm not like up here espousing communism, but in his 1844 manuscripts, he wrote about industrialisation, the process of industrialisation. What he talked about was how industrialisation was alienating. He used these terms, I mean they're translated from German, so there's some awkward terms here. How alienation, how industrialisation, the processes was creating an alienation in people. And he also explained it was a dual process, and this is what really clicked with me. He said that we become alienated from what he called, strangely, our inorganic body. What he meant was nature. So we become alienated from nature, and we become alienated from what he called our human essence, or our essential being. It's been translated both ways. And I thought, that's what this is doing. It's connecting us back to both of those things simultaneously. Through the process of learning to make fire, you have to learn about your natural environment in quite a deep way, as you guys will all know. It's a nuanced skill. And actually that process ends up with what people were describing as a reconnection to human essence, or as well as the natural world. I think it's... So my next question, and this sort of refers to the next question in the survey, was about what skills do you consider to be core bushcraft skills? And I was expecting things like friction fire, knife work, shelter building, and I did get that stuff. But what surprised me was I also got humility, patience, observation, tenacity, and I got all these inner qualities. That was, in research it happens where that was nothing like I expected, and I'm a practitioner, and I should know, but that was nothing like I expected, but I thought, great, this is really interesting. People are describing inner qualities of bushcraft skills. So the values that they're holding within bushcraft is about the development of people. How are we doing for time?
Keep going, please. You're doing awesome, keep going.
15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So, in bushcraft, we develop, and primitive technologies, we develop this, much more so in primitive technologies, we develop this unmediated experience. It's not mediated by technology. Or it's less, the idea is, was carry less by knowing more. And truly it is about that. It's about minimizing technology and maximizing personal skill and knowledge. And there's an anthropologist called Tim Ingold who talks about this, and he uses the idea of the reindeer and lasso, the Sami lasso, and he contrasts it with a food processor. And what he's saying is that whilst the lasso is the most simplest of technologies, it's just a piece of rope, right? Whilst it's the most simplest of technologies, think about the years and years of practice that's in that person's body in order for them to catch a reindeer with us in the middle of a herd. So, what are we saying is sophisticated technology? How are we defining technology? How are we defining sophisticated technology? Whereas the food processor, of course, takes about 30 seconds to learn to use. You push a button and it happens. If something goes wrong with that food processor, I doubt if there's anyone in this room that can fix a food processor. But, it's just awkward. It's all fragmented knowledge. It's lots of different parts. I personally wouldn't know how to start. Some people will, but with the rope breaks. It doesn't matter, does it? He can fix a rope. He can replace that rope because his knowledge is internal. It's not been externalized by technology. So I think this situation around unmediated experience and this fuel of technology, I don't think people go into bushcraft thinking, I want to counter technology. But I think bushcraft, in its values and its core, does do that. It performs that way. So in bushcraft, we develop knowledge from direct experience with the landscape. Of course, it's about experience. You can't learn skills without experience. This directness is attained by minimizing, insulating technology and developing personal technique. And in that, you're obviously developing personal relationships. So bushcraft's foregrounding of technique and relationality provides this counter position to Marx's theory of alienation. At least I'm suggesting that. It's only the start of the discussion. And that's the thing with this PhD. It was the first one. And so it's only a start, and you know, I was grappling with everything with it. You know, there was nothing had gone before like this. So not in terms of academia, where you've got to back everything up all the time. And so even the history was massive. And to try to narrow it down into a chapter or 2 chapters just doesn't do it service. So there's a whole lot more to be discussed there. Yeah, so as I was saying, it essentially boils down to carry less by knowing more. More's knew a lot. The history of, I'm going to read this from anthropologist Tim Ingold. The history of technicity, from the hand tool to the machine, is not the simple to the complex, but it's rather tantamount to the withdrawal of the producer in person from the centre to the periphery. So that's the way it performs in us. We withdraw from the centre to the periphery in terms of our skill, of the production process. The bushcraft puts us right back in the middle of the production process, doesn't it? We're producing fire for ourselves. We're chopping logs to put on our fire to warm us and our community. It's not fragmented, it's not mediated. We don't have to pay the gas bill. So I have people come on courses over the last 18 years and they chop wood a week and they'll say, and I hear this over and over again, this is the hardest I've ever worked. This was supposed to be a holiday, but I feel great. And I would suggest that that feeling great is because of that directness that Karl Marx was talking about. He called it labour, free labour is what he called it. I don't know if it's getting political, but and he was saying that was our human essence, was to produce the whole of something, which he called free labour, free conscious activity. So it's the history, in other words, of not of complexification, but of externalization. You know, technologies externalized us from the natural world. I'm not sure how much more to go through this bit. So I'm kind of drawing it back a little bit into what bushcraft is in the UK today. And a lot of it, because we're a very urban island, and I think it's already been mentioned a few times, we don't have your tracts of wilderness. And so, in terms of skills and context, what's our context? Because we're doing this in little patches of woodland, in our backyards, in our homes. So, is bushcraft just a wilderness technique? Is it just a set of wilderness skills, or does it have another meaning in an increasingly urban environment? Does it have another application? And one of the parts of bushcraft that I think has really risen in the UK is its craft spaces. So, Steve Watts, without the context, it's just arts and crafts. I think there's a discussion there, is it just arts and crafts? Is it still related to bushcraft? And how? So in learning to use a knife and learning to carve green wood, we usually start teaching people to make a spoon or a butter knife or something like this out of green wood, and that teaches them knife skills. In the UK, people have massively picked up on this. There's like spoon carving clubs all over the country, and it's become a thing on its own. It's gone off on yet another confusing tangent which serves to drive us all mad. What is this now? What is this now? Is it green woodworking? Because we have a history of green woodworking. Is it Scandinavian folk crafts? Because a lot of our green woodworking techniques come from Scandinavia. So the whole kind of spoon, bowl, cookser carving emergence is doing this with a Scandinavian style, using Scandinavian style knives. And the idea is that whereas the old British style is just take a bit of wood and use a machine as much as you can. You don't really pay attention to grain or what have you. You just get the object out of the wood. In Scandinavia, it's all about you go into the woods and you choose the shape in the branch. It's already there, and then you follow the grain because that gives the piece you're making inherent elegance and strength and beauty. So there's a huge aesthetic in this. But people are doing this in their homes all over the country. And I kind of used to kind of think, that's not bushcraft, but actually, whatever it is, people are bringing nature back into their domestic sphere, and they're using simple hand tools, and they're engaging, and they're making this relationship in an urban environment where they can't necessarily do it out there, because not only do we have an awful lot, but what we do have is highly restricted and protected. So this is a cookset, or corset, produced by a man called Billy Sundqvist, who's not here anymore, but his son still carries on these traditions, and he's very famous in Sweden for his folk crafts and arts. And he's been a big influence in the UK on how we approach green wood carving, and lots of people like making cookses or corsets. Traditional archaeological knowledge, this is part of bushcraft as well. So I've just been in Romania learning to make these traditional baskets out of a splint of hazel or a wand of hazel. That's all just from a couple of wands of hazel, it takes a day. But this knowledge was lost in the UK. It used to be around Cumbria and Wales, but it's not now. And it was originally a Romani traveller gypsy knowledge, which kind of got deposited in parts of the UK. So I went back out to Romania and learned from the Roma, the gypsies. And I'll probably bring it back into, the realm of bushcraft. So what's going on? We're just cherry picking stuff from all over the place, just to drive Dave mad. But traditional archaeological knowledge is, if you can do that, you can make a fish trap out of a wand of hazel. You can certainly make a survival trap quite quickly if you have the knowledge to weave a basket. So taking skills to a high level is possibly just arts and crafts, but when you put those skills back into a wilderness context, you've got someone whose ability and understanding of how to manipulate the natural world is pretty nuanced and sophisticated, which potentially makes the whole thing easier. And then let's go with it. Just a last note really on primitive technology. Just because I haven't really spoken about it, and I haven't really spoken about it because it wasn't really the core of my thesis, and yet it's there. So, and I think the most I can say I've already said, which is that it doesn't come out of the same military relationship. The military have made a relationship to it because learning to do things without any technology. So in bushcraft we use simple hand tools. Our relationship is with these simple hand tools. In primitive technology you can take away all modern materials. And I guess the military are interested in that because what if someone gets down somewhere and they have nothing? What can they do? But primitive technology doesn't seem to come out of a relationship with military. Military has made a relationship to it. And I'd say that rather it's closer to modern disciplines of archaeology, reconstruction methods, and living history. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But in that, practitioners move, again, closer to an intimate and indigenous relationship with the natural world. So just the last slide. So today, bushcraft today in the UK, I think we can say it's a global practice. It's still travelling, and it's travelling via YouTube and so on, and that's another discussion. It's very much about reconnecting to the natural world and feeling that you have an intersubjective relationship with the natural world. It's being more and more recognised within areas of health and well-being, so it's being used an awful lot for disadvantaged youths, for people with addictions, and it's being used really successfully. It's also become huge in terms of education, because in the UK the whole sort of forest schools idea, which was taken again from Denmark and Scandinavia, has become massive in the last 10 years, and the research on the benefits of that to children in the last 5 years is huge. There's loads and loads of it coming out. So it's being used more and more in forest schools, radical education, and of course recreation. So we perhaps have a few new contexts on the horizon. And I suppose the biggest context again is at this time, in the way that the world is at the moment, getting kids connected to nature, getting people going through processes that develop themselves, that make them feel confident, that give them back a sense of identity if they're going through problems, is perhaps the context that it has in a very urban island called the UK. It's perhaps the most important context, actually. And I think, I have a last quote. I was talking to Tom Roycroft, I think it was, Tom Lucian before, and I remembered this quote and just wanted to pull it up, which was by anthropologist Tim Ingold, again my favourite anthropologist. At the very same moment when the whole world is at our fingertips, it also seems completely out of our hands. And I think I was thinking a little bit about the YouTube stuff and the issues around that as well, and technology again.